Number 16, Missouri 2024 preview on Good Morning College Football. Hello and welcome to episode 66 of Good Morning College Football. I am Nicholas Ian Allen of CFB Winning Edge and CampusToCanton.com. Thank you so much for joining us today for our preseason preview of the team ranked number 16 in our CFB Winning Edge Team Strength Power Rankings, the Missouri Tigers. And Mizzou coming off a excellent year last season, 11-2 final record, beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, carried that momentum into the offseason. Eli Drinkwitz and company are tearing up the recruiting trail. The Tigers are on pace to sign maybe their highest ranked class in program history, at least in the internet recruiting site era. A lot of things really pointed in the right direction for Missouri right now. And expectations are higher than they have been in quite some time in Columbia heading into the 2024 season, which we are 45 days away from week 0 kicking off for the 2024 college football season. And if you have not already, we very much would appreciate you liking this video. We very much would appreciate you subscribing to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. That is a great help to us as we continue to ramp up for the upcoming season, continue to try to grow, get our great college football, college fantasy football, Debbie, all kinds of great content in front of as many people as possible. And part of that, one of the things that we're very proud of, especially when it comes to college fantasy football, the Campus to Canton CFF Guide, 2024 CFF Guide is now available. All 134 teams are featured, full breakdowns, more than 200 player profiles, projections, defense and special teams rankings, all kinds of great stuff from your favorite members of the C2C CFF team, Jared Palmgren, Nate Marquise, Justice, Chris K, Chris Moxley, Ethan Sowers. I chipped in with some numbers, but those who are much smarter and better at college fantasy football than me are the ones who are in charge of the full analysis, digging into each of those player profiles, adding context, and giving you hopefully the keys to a very successful college fantasy football season. Drafts are going right now, supplemental drafts in dynasties, C2C leagues, but of course, a lot of redraft leagues kicking off very soon as well. So if you haven't already, sign up to become a annual NIL member, and you'll get access to that guide. Also, it's available for $20 to non-NIL members. So it's absolutely the best version of the CFF guide that Campus to Canton has produced so far. I was very proud to be asked to be a small piece of that, but really excited and proud of the product that the CFF team has put out there. So if you haven't already, we very much would appreciate you checking that out. But also, you can join CampusToCanton.com for as little as $2.99 per month. Get Discord access to rankings on the site, tons of written content, tools. Just tons and tons of great stuff. Also, for the higher end of the spectrum, if you're an all 22 or C2C Winning Edge tier member, you'll get access to a lot of the sheets that we'll be using during this preview. So our team profiles, our returning production database, our stat projections are going to be official and fully published in just a few days. And so those will all be available as well to C2C Winning Edge and all 22 tier members. Okay, so very quickly before we dig into Missouri, this time of the year, as we record this Wednesday, July 10th, we've seen some conference media days kicking off. There will be a little bit more news in the coming weeks, I imagine. before we get into the full team preview. Not a ton coming out of Big 12 media days. The major story was, of course, Ollie Gordon, Oklahoma State running back, his run-in with the law a few weeks ago, and there was plenty of speculation. How would this impact his 2024 season? Will he be facing a suspension? A lot of guesses that I saw were anywhere between maybe the first half of the first game to maybe a game. In fact, sounds like, according to head coach Mike Gundy, any discipline is going to be done internally, and Gordon will not miss any of the 2024 season. But another thing to watch out for in media days, some teams will put out, a very early pre-fall camp depth chart. We will keep our eyes on those, and especially as we get closer to fall camps opening, you'll see some changes reflected by what we learned coming out of media days, coming out of those early practices. So even though we're moving ahead with our team rankings and basing our previews on our current team strength power rankings, those numbers do change. The team strength ratings themselves, because we do individual player ratings and based on who's starting, who's not. If there's a major injury that pops up, occasionally that will happen in the early days of fall camp. We'll learn something that maybe we didn't know prior, or of course things can unfortunately happen during practices. So keep an eye out. Our power rankings will change. Probably not going to see huge movement unless it's a quarterback injury or something completely unexpected. But the news that we learn between now and kickoff, and even after the season kicks off, of course, our rankings change quite a bit based on how performance plays out on the field. So do keep that in mind. But number 16, Missouri, is the team we're going to discuss today. And since we started CFB Winning Edge and our team strength power rankings back in 2018, I am certain that this is the highest we have ever been on Missouri from a preseason standpoint. Expectations in Columbia are sky high compared to what we're used to. And Missouri has been a winning program for a long time. Been very competitive, very consistent. Well, maybe not consistent, maybe not the best word, but a competitive program that has, often been middle of the pack and sometimes a little bit lower, especially since moving into the SEC. But as last season played out, of course, the Tigers became a very, very dangerous team, capable of beating, frankly, any team it played. The end of the season, had an opportunity on a big stage in the bowl game to knock off one of the blue bloods in college football, Ohio State. That Ohio State team, not quite at full strength, but is a team that's number one in our preseason power rankings. And the last time it took the field, it lost to Missouri. So Missouri ranks pretty high from a national standpoint and an SEC standpoint in returning production, even though the Tigers are not one of the elite recruiters in the SEC or in college football. The way we calculate things, adjusting our player ratings based on experience and production, Mizzou stacks up pretty well, especially at some key positions as far as our position and unit ratings go. Eli Drinkwitz, our numbers respect the work that he has done on the field, so his head coach rating pretty solid as well. But what are others saying about Missouri heading into the 2024 season? We typically discuss, there are a few key pieces that we've referenced several times, talking about NFL draft eligible quarterbacks, of which Brady Cook is one, the returning starter at Missouri. Really established himself recently as a leader in that program. The team rallied around him. The fan base took a little while, perhaps, and there was some discussion. I remember last year, Eli Drinkwitz talking about how he really wished that the Missouri fan base was as bought in on Brady Cook as the team seemed to be. I think they are now, based on last year's performance and him coming back. But the NFL, the talent evaluators, maybe not quite there yet. So another good season for Brady Cook. Maybe he's going to have an opportunity to parlay that into a professional career. But right now, still maybe flying a little bit under the radar. But Missouri as a whole, the team is not. And from a college football standpoint, David Hale, we've mentioned this piece in most every, I think maybe every full team preview that we've done so far this year. Put a tiered system and put all 134 FBS quarterback situations slotted them into tiers. He puts Missouri in tier 3 alongside Memphis, Ohio State, and Ole Miss, teams that return very experienced signal callers, maybe not expected to be high-end Heisman Trophy caliber first-round NFL draft pick type guys, although Jackson Dart is definitely getting a little bit of buzz in that direction. But quarterbacks that are solid, though maybe not spectacular. And Hale, of course, has pulled out at least one really interesting stat for each starting quarterback, projected starting quarterback. And for Cook, he outlines, reading here from the piece, since week 11 of 2022, Missouri's Cook has completed 65.3% of his passes, averaged 7.7 yards per dropback, and posted a 4.83 pass touchdown to interception rate. The full list of others, and he used a minimum of 8 starts to set, as his criteria to do that, to reach those benchmarks. Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner of LSU. Bo Nix, first-round NFL draft pick and Heisman Trophy contender last season. Dylan Gabriel returns as one of the highest, one of the top quarterbacks in college football. From a fantasy standpoint, he's definitely toward the top of the list, usually number 2 in quarterback rankings. And then Caleb Williams, former Heisman Trophy winner, number 1 NFL draft pick. So Brady Cook is in, as David Hale puts it, elite company with those numbers. And, it might not be the most exciting quarterback to pro talent evaluators, might not even be the most exciting quarterback to people who watch college football very closely, but he's won a lot of football games, has emerged as a leader on a quality, dangerous team, and also the numbers show that he is capable of playing at a very, very high level. And partly because of Cook, but also of course, Luther Burden, some talented incoming transfers at running back, on the offensive line, on defense, where Mizzou has a few more holes to fill, or at least potential trouble spots roster-wise compared to the offense. Beyond that, a quite manageable schedule, especially as far as SEC thinking about it goes. And Joel Klatt recently in the Joel Klatt show outlined it quite well. A piece that was written up by Caden Smith of On3 quoted Klatt, who ran through not only a list of how the schedule sets up for Missouri, which we'll show and we'll talk about here in just a little bit, but most important potentially is who Missouri doesn't play. Quoting here from Joel Klatt, they do not play in their conference Georgia. They do not play Texas. They do not play Ole Miss. They do not play LSU, and they do not play Tennessee. This is their toughest SEC game. If they can beat Alabama, they're going to be in Atlanta. So wrap your minds around that. So the key matchup for Mizzou, according to Joel Klatt, who covers college football as well as just about anyone, sees the biggest games every week up close on the Big Noon Kickoff on Fox. If Missouri can navigate this schedule and knock off Alabama, I think there's even a path if Alabama comes out on top of that game, that Mizzou still could maybe sneak into that SEC championship game in Atlanta. But if they beat Alabama, and certainly don't have to worry about beating Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, LSU, or Tennessee, the path is there certainly for Mizzou to make a run at a college football playoff spot. If you're playing for the SEC title, seems like that's going to put you in pretty good position there. And on that note, Bruce Feldman of The Athletic, who did a playoff prediction a couple of weeks ago, basically, according to his follow-up, Mizzou was not in that 12-team playoff prediction from Bruce Feldman, but it sounded like they were perhaps team number 13, first team out. Feldman said, "I struggled with this one more than any other because barring significant injuries, I have a hard time seeing Missouri do worse than 9-3, but I just can't see a fifth SEC team getting in." And, number 16 in our power rankings, definitely within striking distance of that top 12, top 11, if you think, power 4 conference teams. But obviously, if you've gone through and seen those first 15 previews we've done, 6 other SEC teams have already gone ahead of Missouri. So it's going to be very difficult, even with a manageable schedule. And perhaps Mizzou might get a little bit dinged on its playoff resume by not playing as tough of an SEC schedule, at least right now on paper, than some of those teams that currently rank ahead. So how does Mizzou stack up as far as the odds makers, as far as other preseason projections and predictions go? This morning at DraftKings, which is just by habit who I typically use to rate our projections against as far as win totals go and point spreads and things like that during the course of the season, Missouri had a 9.5 win total, regular season win total at DraftKings this morning. I believe the odds were plus 135 on the over. So most, more likely than not, according to the market, according to the odds makers, that Mizzou is going to come up just shy of that at 9, just shy of 9.5, but stacking up, quite well nationally as far as national championship odds, SEC odds, things like that. DraftKings had Missouri 12th in its odds to win the college football playoff at 30-1, 13th in the odds to make the college football playoff, plus 175. So a little, less than 50% if you think of it that way, but still very much in the mix for a playoff spot. And in the SEC, similar to our power rankings, not exactly one of those top contenders, but Mizzou tied for 6th with Tennessee at 14-1 odds according to DraftKings again. Other, computer-based analytics projection systems, other preseason rankings, magazines, other, media outlets and folks who cover college football and predict more how these teams will finish, not necessarily how they stack up on a neutral field like our rankings do. We dig into a wide range, and the highest preseason ranking that I've seen is Mark Schlabach of ESPN, who has Missouri number 8 in his post-spring portal power rankings. ESPN's Football Power Index, more on the computer side of things, has Missouri number 10, as does Athlon Sports, the preseason magazine. SP Plus from ESPN and Bill Connolly has the Tigers number 11, as does the Sporting News. You're seeing that, maybe one computer and one, magazine or human ranking sort of in each of these slots, mostly moving forward. Number 12, Stuart Mandel of The Athletic, and also Beta Rank, another one of those matchups. Andy Staples of On3 had Mizzou 14th in his post-spring rankings. Kelly Ford, the K Ford ratings have Missouri 15th. But then on the low side is Phill Steele, who has a power poll, computer-based poll, and also his preseason top 25, top 40 predictions. He's got Missouri at 18 and 22 in those two. And then we've started including EA Sports in this setup, and the last couple that we've discussed, EA Sports has been on the high side. The college football 25 power rankings do not have Missouri ranked among the top 25 teams in college football. So a bit surprising there, but a little bit of a range here from number 8 to unranked. This Missouri team, there's a wide range of outcomes. Doesn't stack up at the elite talent level, like maybe a Georgia, even an Alabama, who certainly much less experience coming into the season, but those ratings coming out of high school, player ratings individually, Missouri maybe just doesn't have quite that level of high end talent or the depth of that sort of high end talent. But we'll dig into those numbers again here in just a bit. So let's take a quick look at how last season played out for the Tigers. And of course, it was a very excellent year for this program, and a big reason why expectations are as high as they are. Pulling up our CFP Winning Edge 2024 team profiles. If you scroll down in the middle of the page in the schedule section, we have our 2023 results. You can see wins, losses, final score, as well as post-game win expectancy. And we use collegefootballdata.com's post-game win expectancy, post-game advanced box scores to determine if that game were to be played 100 times, 1,000 times, however many, and the box score was the same. What percent of the time would we expect each team to come out on the winning end? And you can see Missouri started off 5-0 with a very impressive performance throughout, including that Kansas State game, which the Tigers pulled off the upset in that game. Officially, I do remember our numbers actually had Missouri favored in that game. I was a little bit nervous about it. It seemed, I don't remember if we were sort of the only ones, but not very many, if I remember correctly. Other projection systems that week had Missouri expected to win that game. Worked out for us, came out on top. Mizzou gets the big win and had a 77% chance of winning that game, statistically speaking. So certainly deserving of that victory. Two more high 90s. I mean, that Memphis win, even though it was just a single possession in the final score, Missouri deserved that one. Had a 99% post-game win expectancy number. LSU, tight game, didn't quite work out. Mizzou comes up short, had just 5% in that one. Gets back immediately to playing great football against Kentucky and South Carolina. Takes a week off and then gives Georgia its most difficult test in the regular season. Other than the Alabama loss in the SEC championship, Georgia basically cruised most every other game. But Missouri actually would have won that game more than half the time, according to those post-game win expectancy numbers, 59% in that 30-21 loss to the Bulldogs. 100% dominant performance against Tennessee, held the Vols to just 7 points. Very, very impressive there. A bit fortunate to beat Florida in a close 33-31, just 18% post-game win expectancy against the Gators. So maybe a little bit of bad luck if you look at it that way against Georgia, but definitely fortunate in a lot of ways to come out on top against Florida. Huge win in the regular season finale against Arkansas in that rivalry game. Just blowout performance from the Tigers. And then, though it wasn't the best Ohio State squad that we have seen, still a very, very impressive performance. Another defensive standout performance from Missouri. The offense maybe lagging just a bit, but that Ohio State defense, as we've discussed, maybe the most talented we've seen in quite some time. So very, very successful season, a real, a memorable campaign for Mizzou. Then we're talking about that 11-win season for a long time, unless perhaps the 2024 season comes out even better, and that's definitely a possibility. How did Missouri stack up statistically? We'll see here at the top of our team performance, or excuse me, the top of our team profiles, including our team performance ratings. Missouri was 14th nationally in those overall team performance ratings. So looking only at statistical factors, how did this team play on the field like a top 15 team last season? 14th in offensive team performance overall, 13th in passing offense, 36th in rushing offense, and then top 30 defensively, number 29 in overall defensive team performance, number 40 against the pass, number 25 against the run. You can see a lot of these key numbers that we use to build those team performance numbers. There are dozens and dozens of others that go in there, but these are certainly among the most important. Scoring margin, all these numbers are taken against FBS opponents only in the regular season only. So even though Missouri did have a very important and successful bowl game against a top quality opponent, those numbers don't factor in here. So we're looking only regular season, only FBS opponents only. We also filter for garbage time when we can. But Missouri, top 20 in scoring margin, 34 points per game on offense, 23.5 on defense, comes out to a top 20, on net, on margin there. Nationally, top 25 in net yards per play, including top 15 on the offensive side of the ball. Number 23 in net points per drive, those coming from Brian Fremeau of bcftoys.com, perhaps my favorite individual team stat there. Net points per drive, I think, is a great indicator of team performance overall. Net yards per pass attempt, Missouri was 15th. Struggled a little bit on the defensive side of the ball, outside the top 50 in yards per pass. Also, as you can see there, points per drive and yards per play allowed. Defensively, those were certainly areas of improvement, but success rate defensively, Missouri was top 25 nationally, just outside the top 25 on offense, on net, 18th there in net success rate. Our EPA equivalent, we use College Football Data's PPA numbers, and on margin there, Missouri number 26, 19th on the offensive side of the ball, closer to 60th defensively. So, these particular numbers, Mizzou, maybe didn't play quite as well as that team performance number would indicate. So certainly some other factors went in to boost that rating. But overall, very, very solid season. And defensively is where we'll discuss some of those returning production numbers maybe just don't quite stack up as well, though they're still, struggle over my words here, not on the extreme low end, a little bit closer to FBS average, but maybe a few more questions, we'll say, as far as the defensive returning production goes. But how does Mizzou stack up nationally? You can see in returning production, number 20 in the FBS rankings, number 3 in the SEC. These are adjusted to include incoming transfers as well. Our raw returning productions are here on this line. You can see Mizzou is number 10 in offensive returning production, raw, just based on who's coming back, who's not from last season, not taking into account those incoming transfers. 76th on the defensive side of the ball, top 20 overall in raw returning production at number 18. But again, adjusted for incoming transfers, that defensive number jumps up to 65th nationally and ends up 20th overall. Brady Cook, 3,300-yard passer, completed 2/3 of his pass attempts. 9 yards per pass attempt is certainly a good number to shoot for. If you can repeat that, I think Mizzou's going to be in very good shape this season. 21-6 touchdown to interception ratio, just an overall very, very solid performance. Cook also can run it a little bit, added more than 300 yards on the ground and 8 touchdowns. But the key piece missing on this offense as far as a skill position standpoint from last season, Cody Schrader took on a very heavy workload, 276 rushing yards, over 1,600 yards on the ground, 14 touchdowns, averaged nearly 6 yards per attempt. That production has been replaced, at least on paper. Marcus Carroll put up very similar numbers, carried almost as many, had that many attempts almost for Georgia State last season, found the end zone almost as much, a little bit lower on the yardage number and the yards per attempt. But Marcus Carroll, excellent season. Seems like he's got maybe a little bit of a lead on fellow Sunbelt transfer Nate Noel, who at App State has been very good over the course of his career. Was limited by injury a bit last season, came up shy of 1,000 yards, 825 on the ground, just 5 touchdowns. But Noel, very much expected to be a key piece of this offense this season. Both he and Carroll, according to spring reports, we discussed a couple of months ago when we first started Good Morning College Football. Those two are definitely working together in that running back room. And though I expect Carroll to emerge as more of the first down, second down back, Nate Noel and his receiving ability, I think he's going to certainly be able to carve out a role in this offense. But Schrader was the running back last season. I mean, Luther Burden is next on this list as far as returning rushing yards go, with the loss of Nathaniel Pete, who did have 76 carries, 317 yards last season. But it was definitely the Schrader show, and not much depth behind. Certainly, if you look past Pete here on the numbers, the only other running back who had a carry last season, Jamal Roberts, who went for -1 yard. -1 yard. So Carroll and Noel filled a big need at running back, and we'll talk about maybe a newcomer who could emerge as an option as well. The receiving room much better as far as returning production and experience go from last season. Luther Burden, of course, All-American candidate, first round NFL draft pick, might be I'm not the NFL draft expert, certainly, but I think it's certainly in the mix. Probably not making going out on too far of a limb to suggest he could be the first wide receiver taken in next year's draft. Certainly seen as a first rounder by most. 120 targets last season, 85 receptions, over 1,200 yards, and 9 touchdowns. A guy who can just put the ball in his hands and let him go to work. He can turn a small gain into a big play. You can see average depth of target for Burden on the low side, especially among this top 4 group at under 9 yards. But somebody that Cook and Eli Drinkwitz just want to get the ball to. And so that's a big part of why that number is a little bit lower. Phill Weiss kind of recaptured some of what made him a very highly rated recruit coming out of high school, signed with Oklahoma. He had 48 catches, 661 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Mookie Cooper, who was also a pretty well-regarded recruit and transferred to Mizzou from Ohio State. Finally, a little bit healthier than he had been in previous years. Did not have a touchdown catch, but decent numbers overall, and proved to be a key piece of that receiving core. And Marquise Johnson, as a freshman last season, 3 of his 13 catches found the end zone, averaged nearly 30 yards per reception. Also a big-time performer in this season's spring game. So Johnson looks like he's going to be emerging as a factor in that receiving unit. I'm a fan of tight end Brett Norfleet. Think that we're going to see him take another step forward as a pass catcher this year. And though Carroll did have better receiving numbers than Noel last season, most indications are, at least coming out of spring, and I think based on previous performance as well, Noel probably going to be used a little bit more as a receiver out of the backfield than Carroll this year for the Tigers. The offensive line, losing 2 full-time starters, Javon Foster and Xavier Delgado, but 3 return. Also, the addition of Marcus Bryant at left tackle from SMU is a key one. Caden Green, former 5-star recruit, highly rated recruit in Oklahoma, the other key piece. So basically expecting that offensive line to continue to play quite well, filled both positions with important and impactful transfers. And on the defensive side of the ball, there was a similar way of doing things for Eli Drinkwitz. Lose your top tackler, Jalen Carleys. Tyron Hopper had an excellent last couple of seasons for Mizzou, 17 pressures last season. And then the more NFL draft pieces who are going to be tougher to replace, perhaps. Chris Abrams-Drain, Darius Robinson, Innis Rakeshaw. But as you can see, the highlighted blue lines here, Mizzou attacked that linebacker room, that defensive line group as well. And then Toriano Pride, former four-star recruit at Clemson, expected to step in and compete certainly for one of those starting cornerback spots as well. But a lot of positive reports about Chris McClellan, the transfer from Florida on the defensive line. But Zion Young, Sterling Webb, Eddie Kelly, Corey Flagg Jr., Khalil Jacobs as well, I think all expected to be contributors on that Missouri defense. So speaking of, what is this team going to look like as far as projected depth chart goes? Saw a sneak peek of it just a bit ago when we were talking about those 2023 stats, but no easy outs, we'll say. No areas on this offensive depth chart that look like they are major areas for concern. Where there was an experienced player who moved on, Eli Drinkwitz and this coaching staff filled it with experience, filled it with talent. We've got Marcus Carroll slotted in that number one running back spot. Nate Noel certainly could end up playing, that could be a little bit more of a split role this season than it was last season with Schrader and Pete. But I think if one of those two is going to emerge in more of a workhorse type role like Schrader played last season, I think Carroll is the more likely. 210 pounds. Nate Noel is definitely below 200 pounds, listed here at 185. So seems like he's built a little bit more to carry that heavier workload if he's asked to. If not, both running backs, I think, could be a very, one of the better running back duos in the SEC. Luther Burden, of course, is the superstar, but Brady Cook, very solid at the quarterback position, has a lot to work with in the receiving core, should be protected quite well on the offensive line. It was a unit that ranked 26th last season in our O-line performance ratings. So solid overall, and expect should be just as good, quite honestly. Could be maybe even a little bit better with Caden Green and Marcus Bryant coming in this season. Quarterback depth was a concern. The addition of Drew Pine via the transfer portal in the spring addressed that, especially with Sam Horn going down with an injury this spring that's likely to cost him the season. The running back room mentioned that depth certainly a little bit of a concern behind Carroll and Noel. Jamal Roberts, we said, was the only player who had a carry last season. DeVorce Jones, former highly rated recruit. Kawan Lacey is expected to come in and perhaps compete maybe for that number 3 running back role. And who knows, both Carroll and Noel, they are certainly productive, have been in the past and experienced, but maybe don't have as high end of talent as somebody like Lacey. So there certainly is a path, I think, for Lacey to maybe even work his way into that primary rotation this season. Excited about his future for sure. How it stacks up as far as raw talent goes. I mean, we mentioned that Missouri's just gone on an absolute tear on the recruiting trail, and up to number 13 in this morning's 247 class ratings, 247 Sports. The key piece that I saw, I don't even really follow recruiting, but certainly saw the commitment of Matt Zollers, who On3 has rated now as a 5-star, number 11 player overall in the class of 2025. So these numbers that you're seeing here, the raw recruiting rankings, where Missouri is, top 25 or very close in a lot of positions on the offensive side of the ball. Number 22 as far as overall offensive players in the 247 ratings. Number 5 in wide receiver ratings from a raw talent standpoint, 247 Sports composite average rating. It's a very, very solid offense put together by Eli Drinkwitz, and seems to be like these numbers are going to be moving even farther, into the top 20, maybe even into the top 15 if things play out, if things stay as good as they look right now. Defensively, very similar numbers. Number 25 in average 247 defensive rating. The defensive back room, the secondary, appears to be the best on paper as far as that average ranking goes. Number 19 nationally, number 33 among linebackers, number 25 on the defensive line. You can see on the right end of this box here, position strength. These are where we take those raw talent ratings, adjust them for experience and career production. And you can see that that quarterback room moves from a top 50-ish type unit to top 25, and maybe even an opportunity to improve from there, especially if Brady Cook puts up some good numbers early in the season, adds production points to those numbers there. The running back situation stays mostly the same, as does the wide receiver room. The offensive line takes a little bit of a step up based on its experience. The defensive rooms mostly hold, but because that is the more inexperienced unit, based on who this team lost last year, a little bit more like a top 30, 35 defense as far as the roster strength numbers go, the defensive roster strength numbers, instead of top 25 like the raw talent would indicate. But defensively, a lot coming back as far as overall starters, 5 starters, which didn't used to be very many, now seems like is a little more maybe middle of the pack, but certainly some experience to build around, especially Johnny Walker Jr. As we mentioned, Chris McClellan, probably underrated here as an 86 rated player according to our video game ratings. Think of them similarly to the college football 25 EA Sports overall ratings. I think our numbers tend to be a little bit higher on the whole. Also, we go past 99. We go into the 100s, which I'm sure you saw there with Luther Burden on the offensive side of the ball at a 102, almost 103. But McClellan was really, I think maybe the most discussed member of that defense this spring. So expect him to have a bigger impact than that rating might indicate. But he, Johnny Walker, Christian Williams, also Joe Moore, who was very productive prior last season, not as much, only played 20% of the team snaps last year. But that looks like a very solid front four, and the added depth with Zion Young, Sterling Webb, Darius Smith, who has been a linebacker, looks like he's probably a little more likely to play more of a defensive end role in Missouri's 4-2-5 base defense, coming from a 3-4 at Georgia. But overall, very solid on the defensive line. The linebacker room should be in pretty good shape with Chuck Hicks as a returning starter, Corey Flagg as the expected incoming starter. But how's that secondary going to work out? Dalen Carnell and Joseph Charleston, returning starters. Toriano Pride, expect he's going to compete for one of those starting spots as well. But Drayden Norwood, Sidney Williams are a little more on the maybe not inexperienced. Both played roughly half of snaps for this defense last season, but were not, quote unquote, starters, did not take the field with that first team immediately. Caleb Flagg, incoming transfer, was the MVP of the spring game defensively. Had a solid season last year at Houston Christian, walk on. So not, the highest rated player, not the biggest expectations, but really emerged as a playmaker last season. He's going to be, I think, a fun one to watch, see if he can emerge there as a key player. And then one true freshman here for Missouri on the defensive depth chart, Trajan Greco, and I might mispronounce that. My apologies. I said I'm not a recruiting guy. I don't watch a lot of high school football anymore. But I did catch one game last season. It was a Dylan Raiola, his offense, his high school Buford High School in Georgia. They were playing, was it Brookwood where Greco went? And Greco was the player on that game, the one high school game I paid a lot of attention to last season. I came away most impressed. So very curious to see how he plays this year. And it looks like there's certainly a path to early playing time for him as a defensive back for the Tigers. But looking at this season's projections, we mentioned that DraftKings win total is 9.5. We're below that. We come in on the under in our official win total projections. I've mentioned this before, so please bear with me, but we've been doing those win total projections in this manner every year for all 100 FBS or all 134 or however many there were that particular year, FBS teams, and track them. How did we do wins, losses? Also, what are the odds? How did we do on a fictional $100 bet for each? And since 2021, when we started tracking those, we have a 60.4% win rate. Last season was 55.6%. That was our lowest. But overall, I feel pretty good about that. I think that if we're able to come out on the right side 55.5% of the time, that's pretty good to me. On these win totals, 60% over the 3 years, I feel very, very good about. But there is always room for improvement. So this year we're trying to see if we can capture a little bit better, a little bit more, I don't know what the right word is, diversity or because basically all the top teams, top 20 type teams, we're going to be on the under for their win total. The bottom 20, 25 teams, we're going to be on the over. That has worked out, I guess, more often than not, but I want to get a little bit more precise maybe. And so we have an adjusted win total that we're tracking this year. It's not going to be in our official numbers, but hopefully it'll help to give a little bit of a bonus. So a 10% of a win bonus for every matchup in which a particular team is a favorite, a 10% penalty for every matchup in which that team is a projected underdog. Missouri here is favored in 9 games, an underdog in 3, even though those Oklahoma and Texas A&M matchups are basically coin flips. We still count those as Missouri being an underdog, so that's a +6 in that adjusted win total. So we add the 8.55, add that 0.6 wins to it. We're still under the 9.5. So we're not going to quite get there for Missouri, even with the updated number. So even though this is a very manageable schedule, 65th in the FBS ranked in our strength of schedule numbers, that is maybe the lowest I've ever seen for an SEC team. Was it last year? Kentucky was maybe in the 50s, something like that. Very manageable. This is FBS average, right? Basically, and for an SEC team, that's almost unheard of. So Missouri absolutely could overperform, get to 10 regular season wins. Absolutely, the path is there for 11 wins, maybe undefeated, right? We don't have Missouri as more than a 5-point underdog in any matchup, and that's that game against Alabama that Joel Klatt, outlined as the one that would get Missouri into the college football playoff most likely, or into the SEC championship game is what he said. I think that'll probably get them into the playoff. But Missouri is favored by 5 in every other game. Certainly, some of those are losable. That Auburn game right before Alabama, the one home game in 3 out of 4 weeks, Missouri's on the road. I don't necessarily love that. So that I don't think sets up super well for Alabama. That trip to UMass is kind of weird. Shouldn't be an issue. I think Missouri's going to win that game easily. But that's a bit of a hike, and also getting on a plane for 3 times in a month is can wear on you just a little bit. So that Auburn game, I think is going to be a little bit tricky. That Oklahoma game, our numbers are very high on Oklahoma. Playing at South Carolina is never easy. Playing at Mississippi State, even though Mississippi State's our second to lowest SEC team in our power rankings. Back-to-back road games, even against opponents that aren't considered to be top tier SEC teams. So there's maybe a little bit of hidden difficulty in some of these, but the list of the list of teams that Mizzou doesn't have to play, I think far outweighs that. And I think that this experienced team is capable of winning the games it's supposed to win, and maybe even knocking off a team that maybe you wouldn't expect it to. So this Mizzou squad maybe a little underrated in our numbers, certainly compared to some. You might say a little bit underrating their win total projection here, but also, our numbers, I do just sort of get out of the way and trust them. So we're going to be under Mizzou here, but the path to a very, very special season is absolutely there. If the quarterback play continues, if Luther Burden, plays to All-American standards, if the transfers at running back, the experience at wide receiver take a little pressure off of Burden, that offensive line continues to play like a top 25 unit, maybe even creeps into the top 20 or top 15. And then defensively, the secondary is maybe the key area of concern. Didn't quite hit the transfer portal as hard to replace those NFL players on the back end like this coaching staff did on the defensive line and at linebacker. But if they're able to overcome that as maybe the only real trouble spot, not even trouble spot, but still have a little bit of a question roster-wise on paper about the secondary. If it plays up to like a top 25 unit, then this Missouri team absolutely could make its way to the SEC championship game, could make its way into the playoff, could be a dangerous team in that playoff. So the path is definitely there, especially the way the schedule sets up. So that will do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for liking this video and for subscribing to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. We will be back on Friday with our Louisville preview. We've got Texas A&M coming up on Monday. I'm actually going to be traveling over the weekend, so we're going to pre-record those on Thursday and release them for Friday and Monday. So if there's any major news that we miss from any of these media days or anything else that comes up, we will get to that in full, I imagine, on the following Wednesday. So everyone, I hope you have a great rest of the week. Our next preview will be up on Friday. But until then, take care and thank you for joining us.